We now come to questions. Secretary of State for Defence with Jerome Mayhew.
Number one, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Prime Minister confirmed that this government is committed to increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP with a fully funded plan. And, Mr. Speaker, obviously the public want to know that we will also deliver value for money. That is why, in parallel, we're also delivering a fundamental reform of acquisition with our new integrated procurement model.
Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we heard an announcement about the development of a radio wave drone killer. How is the integrated procurement model both encouraging and accelerating the development of this novel technology?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He highlights the fantastic news last week. We confirmed we are developing a new radio frequency directed energy weapon. Mr. Speaker, it's an extraordinary capability which, with one strike, can inflict hard kill on multiple drones at a cost of about 10p a shot. And how that exemplifies the new approach, it's in particular that close relationship between industry and our scientists and defence, and in particular with DSTL. And by having the strength of that industry, that's how we drive innovation and get the best kit into the hands of our armed forces.
Thanks. John Spellar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we're very pleased to know that there was an announcement for the Prime Minister and that the Department have got plans. But what we actually need is industrial capacity. And when the Department are handing out orders for fleet solid support ships to Spain, when they took 18 months to actually order munitions, when today's Times shows a significant drop in the number of apprenticeships, and when the Department admits it still won't take past performance into account when they're awarding future contracts, what sort of confidence can we have there will actually be the industrial capacity and the real orders to enable our defence industry not only to be competitive but to actually supply our forces?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we are massively ramping up defence capacity. He spoke specifically about 155 shells. That's precisely why we've reached a contractual agreement with BAE. They'll be ramping up production in Wales, ramping up production in the northeast of England. We're doing that with ships and, of course, with complex weapons and, as I said earlier, in particular with novel weapons with our science base, which it's all about giving our armed forces the capability that will give them the cutting edge.
Comes to the Chair of the Select Committee, Jeremy Quin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. GCAP will be a terrific boost to our defence and aerospace industries. To maximise success, we've got to keep the Typhoon production lines ongoing until they come on board. So what are the ministers doing to ensure we do maintain exports?
Well, the Chairman and Select Committee asked an excellent question. I can assure him there is an effort across government to promote those key defence exports, not least Typhoon. But of course, one of the key factors in our new integrated procurement model is to drive exportability, because it not only ensures, Mr. Speaker, industrial resilience, but it enables us to have that protection against those overly exquisite requirements from the domestic side, which can mean we have delayed procurement. So it's a very good question, and we are absolutely focused on delivering greater defence exports.
Sir Dyke.
Mr. Speaker, Somerset is home to several organisations in the defence sector, such as Tellers and Leonardo. However, companies in defence are concerned about the shortage in STEM skills in the UK, with 48% of defence employers reporting a shortage of workers with engineering skills. So what steps is the Minister taking alongside Cabinet colleagues to remedy these shortages and ensure the UK defence sector remains competitive?
Well, the honourable lady asked a very good question. The previous question about defence capacity, of course, a key part of capacity isn't just industrial capacity in terms of buildings, it's also about people, so she's absolutely right. I visited Yeovilton in Somerset, where I met apprentices who were involved in the programme for our helicopters. Indeed, we were demoed AI, which is helping us to improve the availability of our helicopters. So there's work happening across defence and across government. We want to do more to ensure we have those apprentices and those key skills in our defence sector.
Shadow Secretary of State John Healey.
Mr. Speaker, since the new shipbuilding strategy was launched 2 years ago, ministers have given new build defence contracts to the Netherlands, to Spain, and last week to France, just 2 days after the Defence Secretary declared he was determined that new Navy vessels will be built here in the UK. He's the government's shipbuilding czar. Why won't he back UK shipbuilding?
Well, I would point out, of course, that a shipbuilding strategy costs money, and that's why we're committed to 2.5% spending on GDP, unlike the honourable gentleman. But in terms of this key point about the shipbuilding strategy, I've been to Scotland. I've seen those amazing yards where we're building the Type 26, the Type 31. I've been to Appledore, where they're contributing to FSS. We are committed to a UK shipbuilding sector. And as the Secretary of State confirmed in his speech last week, Mr. Speaker, by value of future order book, this country is now #1 for naval exports.
The Hollobone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're making excellent progress implementing the Defence Drone Strategy, which I launched back in February. Our priority was to learn the lessons from Ukraine to build a sovereign industrial ecosystem to enable uncrewed procurement at scale for the British Armed Forces. In terms of platform production, our immediate priority remains to deliver drones to the Ukraine, and I confirm that we have delivered 4,000 drones, with many more on their way in the coming months.
Does my honourable friend, the Minister for Defence Procurement, agree that when it comes to the drone threat, a key priority has got to be counter-drone technology to defend our own forces? And does he agree that direct energy weapons will have a key role in this regard?
Mr. Speaker, two excellent points. Firstly, he's absolutely right. Our drone strategy must include a focus on how we defend our own armed forces against the threats that are out there. And he's also right that a key part of our solution is directed energy weapons. I said to my old friend from Broadland earlier about the radio frequency directed energy weapon, but of course we've also announced our procurement of laser weapons with Dragonfire. Using our new procurement system, we want to get them into the hands of our armed forces as fast as possible. That means on naval ships by 2027, using our new minimum deployable capability.
Jim Shannon.
Can I thank the Minister very much for that? Northern Ireland's workforce skills are renowned across this whole world. Northern Ireland would very much like to be part of the UK defence drone strategy. So can I ask the Minister this very simple question? What's been done to ensure that Northern Ireland's workforce skills are used for the benefit of all the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Well, what a fantastic question, Mr. Speaker, and I can answer him very simply. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Belfast at the Talis factory, where they are manufacturing some of the best weapons available. They are going to be a key part of defence exports and, of course, fundamentally, a key part of the future for orders for the British Army. So, absolutely, Northern Ireland is very much part of our defence industry.
Chris Stevens. Can the front bench answer the question as though it's been asked?
By all means, Mr. Speaker. In 2023, Mr. Speaker, 262 service complaints relating to bullying, harassment and discrimination were ruled admissible compared to 227 in 2022. I'm pleased to say changes to the service complaint system in June 2022 have been encouraging people to come forward with their complaints. And the My Complaints app, launched in October, will make the system easier and more accessible.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Defence Anti-Bullying Hotline is a great step forward, ensuring members of the armed forces have the support they need any day or time of night. But what training can the Minister share with me that the advisors have got, not only to help our armed forces, but also to make sure everything is completely anonymised so they can actually go forward their lives and get the support and help they actually need?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the question. Obviously, a hotline is no good if the individuals at the other end of it are not trained, and I can give my honourable gentleman the assurance that he seeks. But I think the most important thing here is that people just need to have the confidence that if they come forward with their complaints, they will be listened to and taken seriously.
Shadows Minister Maria Edel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, can I thank the Parliamentary Secretary for Defence, People and Families for inviting me to visit the Defence Serious Crimes Unit, which I did last Thursday. And they're obviously doing good work focused on tackling serious sexual and violent crimes in the armed forces. But given the doubling of reports of bullying, discrimination and harassment in the MOD since 2019, and some cases remaining unresolved for up to 3 years, what's the Minister now doing to address this toxic culture in his own department? And why is it that such things seem to be worsening on this government's watch?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for her question. I think she will have to admit that a lot has been done over the past certainly 2 or 3 years, including the setting up of the Defence Serious Crime Unit and the Victim and Witness Care Unit. They're very important, and the general message has been that we have a zero-tolerance approach, and the general message has been come forward and you will be listened to and you will be taken seriously. And some of the figures, some of them, I think it's reasonable to assume, are the result of people having that confidence in coming forward so their complaints are investigated independently, whereas previously that was not the case.
Number 4, Mr. Speaker. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Defence remains committed to detecting biological threats. We continue to work closely with the Cabinet Office in this matter, and we are the lead department of the Detect pillar within the biological security strategy. We've prioritised funding to create the UK Microbial Forensics Consortium, which will strengthen our ability to detect biosecurity threats now and into the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Over the past few years, the cost and the impact of security failures through biosecurity has, of course, been much greater than through physical security. So as the funding for the defence of this country rises to 2.5% of GDP, will he ensure that he works with the Cabinet Office, UXA, the Health Department and others to ensure that biosecurity, including the threat from synthetic new threats, is absolutely at the top of the agenda?
Mr. Speaker, we certainly will, and through the biological security strategy and the associated governance structure, we are working closely with UK Health Security Agency to coordinate our response to biodefence risk, and we're investing £5 million per year into our international biosecurity programme, so we are on the same page.
British Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, would the Minister agree that there are real concerns here and recent reports of the increasing recklessness of Russian operatives, both directly and indirectly, interfering in our economy, in every aspect of British lives? Are we prepared for that kind of mischievousness?
Speaker, yes, we are.
Kenny McCusker.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An agreement for UK-Israel military cooperation was signed in December 2020. There are no current plans for this agreement to be updated, but we are continually reviewing it to ensure it remains relevant.
The rector of Glasgow University, an eminent Palestinian surgeon, has been narrating the horrors of requiring to operate and even amputate on children, often without morphine, in Gaza. He's also additionally detailed the horrors of the use of white phosphorus munitions which ignite during the course of surgery when exposed to the atmosphere and require dowsing during a very complicated operation. Why are we in a military pact with military forces that carry out such actions? And if he will not repudiate the pact entirely, will he ensure that the use of white phosphorus munitions is not acceptable in our name?
Well, of course it's not, Mr. Speaker, and we have no role in that, and we see no evidence of that being, the prospect of that being used. I think that what we should focus on, Mr. Speaker, is the confidence that Israel is an important ally. We can therefore make the point that the protection of civilians is of utmost importance. But we should also remember, Mr. Speaker, that at the heart of this conflict is the fact that if peace is to be achieved, really what needs to happen is for Hamas to lay down its arms and to release the hostages.
Andrew Percy.
For an intifada, and if you chant genocidal chants, you are a supporter of Hamas. People can be inadvertent supporters and help and aid and abet Hamas too. And one way in which that would happen is by an arms embargo on Israel, whilst Iran would continue to arm Hamas to repeat, as they have said they wish to, the October 7th attacks. So can the Minister confirm that the UK government has no interest in changing its current policy in regards to its defence agreements with Israel?
Well, Mr. Speaker, indeed, and we are assured by the strength of our relationship with Israel that we can therefore have a strong relationship that allows us to make representations about the protection of civilians, about the increase of the flow of humanitarian aid, and we do that in the context of them being an extremely important ally and cognizant of the broader threat from the terrorist group of Hamas, and indeed, as my honourable friend mentions, Iran.
Cavan Jones.
The F-35 programme has not only given capability to our Air Force and Navy, which is world leading, but it's also provided jobs and technological advancement within the UK defence industry. Could he give an assurance that any review of our relationship with Israel will not jeopardise that programme?
I can give him that absolute assurance. We're immensely proud of the F-35 project, Mr. Speaker, which delivers devastatingly effective fighting power for us and our allies, and of course also delivers 20,000 UK jobs.
Mr. Speaker, following from the 2020 agreement, in November 2021, Britain and Israel signed a memorandum of understanding elevating the UK-Israel bilateral relationships to a strategic partnership. This partnership is underpinned by extensive security and defence cooperation, but it also states we will cooperate in improving Palestinian livelihoods and Palestinian economic development. How does my honourable friend see the future of this memorandum in the light of the war in Gaza?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend answered a very relevant question because our commitment to a two-state solution in which Palestinians achieve statehood is at the heart of our diplomacy and indeed our defence posture throughout the region, and our commitment to that is unchanged.
Helen Morgan.
Number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Defence Infrastructure Organisation's accommodation budget has not yet been finalised for the financial year 24-25, but this government continues to invest significant sums to improve UK service SFA. The spend for 23-24 on SFA maintenance improvement was £384 million. An additional £400 million of funding over financial years 23-24 and 24-25 was announced as part of the Defence Command Paper refresh last July.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The new head of infrastructure at the DIO, Air Commodore Leah Griffin, has written in her monthly newsletter to military families that the current financial situation is more challenging than ever and only non-urgent repairs will be considered. And we can see this on the ground in my constituency, where a service person whose partner's had abdominal surgery has not been able to climb in and out of their bath to have a shower and has been refused any kind of modification to assist them. This kind of financial challenge has a real impact on servicemen and women's lives. So can the Minister look at this problem and commit to ensuring that we have a decent standard of accommodation for those people who put their lives on the line for us?
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. She is consistent in raising accommodation issues as ever. If she has a specific case, and she's more than welcome to write to me about that particular one, if she hasn't done so already. On the funding, I would gently remind her that we did commit an additional £400 million, Mr. Speaker, and because of our commitment to 2.5%, we've confirmed we are therefore enabled to put another £4 billion into SFA over the next 10 years, a significant investment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend will agree with me that it's important that our service accommodation is of a high quality, but we should also be helping to support members of our armed forces to buy a home for themselves and for their families. What support does the modernised accommodation offer give to help soldiers, sailors and pilots to get onto the housing ladder?
Well, my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and I must say speaks to my previous career running a small business, helping first-time buyers, Mr. Speaker. Of course, Armed Forces Help to Buy has been a great success, but we also recently confirmed support with conveyancing costs because, of course, the costs of getting on the property ladder, it's not just the purchase itself, it's all of those ancillary costs, but we're committed to supporting our armed forces personnel, whether that means investing in accommodation of those in SFA or SLA, but also helping those who want to get onto the property ladder.
Shannon, Minister Luke Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone who serves our country should live in a decent home. But last month, the independent Kerslake Commission report into Armed Forces housing found the majority of service personnel are dissatisfied with housing conditions and very dissatisfied with the maintenance and repairs service. With 1 in 3 service personnel still living in the lowest grade service accommodation, government words simply aren't matching actions. So can the Minister honestly look service families in the eye and say military housing under this government is good enough?
But of course, the debate we've just been having is about investment. We put in an additional £400 million. That means we've been able to overhaul thousands of properties, upgrades to deal with damp and mould, to put in new heating systems, etc. But it costs money. Our commitment to 2.5% means we're going to get an extra £4 billion over the next decade. But armed forces personnel know that Labour cannot possibly deliver that because they won't match our commitment to 2.5%.
Number 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, protecting the United Kingdom and responding to threats on our territorial waters is core business, and in conjunction with our allies and partners, we constantly monitor activities within UK waters and deter threats, and our warships patrol throughout and are routed through the North Sea frequently in order to achieve that deterrence.
I thank the Minister for his answer. In the North Atlantic, Russian submarine activity has approached the most significant level since the Cold War, and operations such as Dynamic Mongoose are a welcome commitment to both NATO and North Sea security. So can I ask the Minister to tell me how much of the new tranche of defence spending will be directed at the North Sea and Arctic security?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course we don't comment on our magnificent continuous at-sea deterrence. What I can say is clearly that it is a matter of public record that we are committed to a magnificent new generation of Type 26 anti-submarine warfare frigates that will achieve the competitive edge that keeps us all safe.
Does the Minister recognise that the seismic ray situated at Estheomuir in my constituency plays an important part in our defences, not just in the North Sea but elsewhere? And does he agree with me that it's essential that its capability is not in any way diminished by excessive wind farm development in the immediate vicinity of the facility?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do agree with the right honourable gentleman. He's absolutely right in his analysis. And I would say the broader point also is that this is another example of why, undoubtedly, England and Scotland, through the Union, are safer and better together.
Question 8, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the UK and Israel have a long-standing defence relationship, as we've discussed already this morning. Israel is a partner in the region, and an agreement for UK-Israel defence cooperation was signed in December 2020.
Andrew Bridgen.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but Mr. Speaker, the problem of unconditional UK military support for Israel is that, while quite rightly there's a majority of this House and a majority of the British public who support our intervention to help protect Israel from missile attacks from third countries, when it comes to Israel's intervention and aggression in Gaza, it's a different story. How will Her Majesty's Government's policy aim to sort out this conundrum?
Well, Mr. Speaker, nothing is unconditional, but we, as I've already made the point this morning, is that we are supporting our ally overcome a devastating terrorist attack, and we do that because that's the honourable thing to do. Simultaneously, we make the point to our ally that the protection of civilian lives must be at the top of the operational agenda. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we use our military capability to ensure that as much humanitarian aid can flow into Gaza as quickly as possible.
Mark Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of the damning International Criminal Court statement today, how concerned is the Minister on the potential impact on the UK's military relationship with Israel?
Well, it has no bearing, and we will make our judgments about the legality of our actions on our own terms, and we are confident in that legality.
Bob Blatton.
Question number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our armed forces, through Opshada, which is of course focused really on the Daesh threat in Iraq, we continue to support the development of the Iraqi government in terms of their security, and we commend and thank the men and women involved in Opshada throughout the region, and we do that also with the knowledge that Iran is indeed a threat that is undermining regional stability.
Blatton.
I thank my honourable friend for that answer. Clearly, the brave resistance fighters in Iran will be celebrating the demise of the Butcher of Tehran today. But of course, Iran controls Hamas, Hezbollah and other terrorist organisations. Given the attack by Iran on Israel, what further assessment has my honourable friend taken of the potential for Iran to launch another attack?
Mr. Speaker, we take the threat that Iran poses very seriously. We note that it uses its very malign influence to continue to destabilise the Middle East through its pernicious use of proxies. And our judgment is that that capability and intent remains. Our role in deterrence regionally is hugely important. And I was very pleased recently to visit the magnificent sailors of the Royal Navy stationed in Bahrain. And I reiterated that point in terms of the fantastic deterrent effect that they were having when I had a highly productive interview with BFBS. And you will know, Mr. Speaker, if you listen to BFBS as I do, that point can't be overmade. We are grateful to the magnificent activities of our Royal Navy keeping us all safe in the Gulf.
As the Minister has said, the Operation Shader was originally put together in 2014 to defeat Sunni Islamic State in Syria and the Levant. The Liberal Democrats are very supportive of the way that the Royal Air Force was used last month to help intercept the Iranian bombardment of Israel. But the last parliamentary vote on Operation Shader was held in 2014, when members were approving resources and deployment of UK armed forces to defeat ISIL. Will the Minister subject any operation that is designed to deter Iranian attacks to a debate and a vote?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it seems to me it's the settled view that it's a good thing that we're doing Operation Shader, and I don't sense any appetite from colleagues across all these benches for a parliamentary vote. I should also put on record, Mr. Speaker, that I was very pleased to meet the men and women of the Expeditionary Air Wing in Romania, who had contributed so bravely over the recent months to the magnificent military effect that is delivered through that operation.
Jill Furness.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Well, with permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 10 and 22 together. Of course, as we've discussed this morning, there is desperate need for increased humanitarian support to Gaza, and we, especially in the MOD, are working alongside partners and international organisations to enable the Cypriot Maritime Aid Corridor Initiative.
Jill Furness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the past few months, we've seen shocking levels of suffering in Gaza. The only sustainable way to end this humanitarian disaster is through an immediate ceasefire and the return of all hostages. But in the meantime, aid must be provided to save the lives of innocent civilians. So can the Minister explain why there's only been one shipment of UK aid in more than 6 months and none so far this year?
Speaker, quite to the contrary. We have been hugely active. We've had 11 airdrops delivering over 110 tonnes of humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's in concert with our friends in Jordan, and we commend the magnificent men and women of the Royal Air Force who've been instrumental in delivering that much-needed aid.
Andrew Quin.
Thank you, and I echo the commendation that the Minister has just given to our air service personnel, but nobody can be unmoved at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with scenes of children dying of hunger. It's utterly intolerable. I welcome the government's efforts to deploy UK aid flights and aid drops into Gaza, but the mounting scale of the disaster is showing that this is simply not enough. So can the Minister explain what the government's doing to increase the number of UK aid shipments, including access to the Ashdod port?
Mr. Speaker, what we are doing is seeking to ensure an increased flow, not just through the air, but also by road and also by sea, which is why we've been instrumental in the setting up of the humanitarian pier. We commend and thank the captain and crew of the RFA Cardigan Bay that is providing life support to those involved in that pier delivery, and we hope this is the first of an increased sequence of increased deliveries across all three routes.
Paula Hamilton.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer 11 and 19 together. Our commitment to NATO is unwavering in our response to Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, and we've committed almost all of our forces to NATO. We also contribute to every single NATO mission and declare our nuclear deterrent to NATO, and not least in our increased defence spending to 2.5% GDP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Public Accounts Committee have warned that deterrence can only be effective if our armed forces are credible. But this has been undermined by recruitment issues, with more people leaving the armed forces than being recruited. What message does the Secretary of State think that this sends to our NATO allies? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very pleased to inform the House and the Honourable Lady that actually we're now seeing a very high level of applications. For example, I was just speaking to the First Sea Lord last week, who was telling me that HMS Raleigh, where the training takes place, is at its most full for 8+ years in terms of the number of people going through. We've seen a big increase in applications to all 3 services, and long may it continue.
Brenda Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Minister recognises that the UK plays an outsized role in NATO as a crucial bridge between the US and Europe. Does the Minister agree that the UK should be contributing its huge industrial expertise to EU defence and security programmes, offering NATO additional resilience and choice, as well as securing sovereign capability through homegrown intellectual property?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. Our missions are indeed outsized to NATO. We are the second biggest spender in NATO. We're the largest in Europe by, as Stoltenberg, the Secretary-General, said to me the other week, a country mile. And we'll contribute, as I said in my original answer, to every single NATO mission. Plus, we declare our nuclear deterrent to NATO, the only country in Europe between us and France who does that. We'll always look at ways to do more with NATO. Committing to 2.5% of GDP is a very, very clear signal that we're on the side of doing that.
James Gray.
Maintaining freedom of passage through the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap is absolutely an essential task of NATO, particularly at a time of war for the resupply of Europe. But would the Secretary of State not agree with me there's an equally big threat coming from half the Russian fleet in the Arctic? And will you join us on Thursday the 8th of July at a symposium which NATO and we are holding jointly in Portcullis House to discuss defence in the Arctic?
It's a very important point, and it's been raised in the debate already, or in the questions already today, about the size of the Russian fleet, what they're doing, and where they're active. I will certainly have to check the date rather than answer him from this dispatch box, but of course I'm much predisposed to do so.
Shadow Minister Steve McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're warned by the Secretary of State that we're in a pre-war world, yet we don't have sufficient training and resources to undertake high-intensity war fighting, and we don't have the equipment and stockpiles for our forces to survive a prolonged campaign. Mr. Speaker, it's been 14 years. When will this be put right?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman may not be aware that we've just provided the largest amount of personnel to the largest NATO exercise in Europe since the Cold War for 40 years. And the United Kingdom can be very proud of the number of people we supplied on land, in the air and at sea. That was Operation Steadfast Defender. But I do have to come back to this very fundamental point to the opposition front bench, that you can't just wish yourself to security. You have to spend the 2.5%, and you have to set out the trajectory to get there, and that's exactly what we've done on this side of the House.
Thompson.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman's asked about the Trident programme, but I'm unclear whether he means the Dreadnought submarine part of that. They are, of course, different parts of a programme, often combined together, but the Dreadnoughts themselves, if that was the question, will enter service in the early 2030s.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that was an interesting answer from the Secretary of State. And well, the Government and the loyal opposition have both pledged to commit to Trident renewal, investing obscene amounts of money that would otherwise be best served to improve our NHS, help households with the cost of living, supporting personnel or indeed veterans. According to House of Commons Library briefing, Trident renewal is expected to cost $21 billion in the year 22-23 prices, where 1 in 3 of our children are currently living in poverty. When will the Secretary of State agree that Trident renewal is an obscene waste of money that could be better put to much better uses?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was recently at Faslane in Scotland, and I can tell him it's not what the people employed in the Defence Secretary think about Trident, but I can tell him something else as well. Having stood at this dispatch box and been the Defence Secretary, I know that the defence of this country is vastly supported by having our nuclear deterrent, and every other issue that we face, in my view, comes after defence of this realm.
So Julie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although the Honourable Gentleman for Midlothian is a valued member of the Intelligence and Security Committee, I think the Secretary of State would agree with me that the SNP are very much on their own on the issue of scrapping the nuclear deterrent. And I'm put in mind of a quotation from the late Dennis Healey, who said, "Once we cut defence expenditure to the extent where our security is imperilled, we have no houses, we have no hospitals, we have no schools, we have a heap of cinders." And isn't that endorsement of deterrence as true today as it was when he gave it 55 years ago?
State.
Absolutely right, Mr. Speaker.
Question 13, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with your permission, I'd like to answer questions 13, 20 and 23 together. Currently, around 96% of service family accommodation, SFA, meets or exceeds the government's decent home standards. Only these properties should be allocated to our families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a base primarily for our Royal Marines, Chivener in North Devon sees personnel stationed there for shorter periods of time than many other military services. Would my right honourable friend consider additional support for high turnaround bases, maybe including access to dental services for forces families where there are problems registering for local providers?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend. I very much enjoyed visiting RM Chivener last summer and congratulate my honourable friend, who is a very consistent champion of the armed forces in her constituency. MOD Dental Healthcare provides dentistry for our armed forces personnel, ensuring they are dentally fit and ready to deploy in the UK and overseas. And of course, the NHS provides dental care for civilians, and this includes the families of armed forces personnel. I'd be more than happy to arrange a meeting between the Honourable Lady and MOD Dental Healthcare if she so wished.
Sir Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Department continues to sell off service accommodation for armed forces personnel, including within my own constituency in Whittington, and has now abandoned plans to allocate based on the family size, does the Minister accept that this can contribute to low recruitment and retention levels for the armed forces?
That is entirely why, Mr. Speaker, we are investing in our estate. I said in my answer to the previous questions the importance of the additional £400 million. This is not abstract. That has enabled us to make a real difference to the accommodation armed forces, putting in thousands of treatments for damp and mould, lots of new homes getting new doors, new boilers, etc. That is the difference the funding makes, and that's why our commitment to 2.5% is so important. It's not just about capability, it's also about the homes of our armed forces personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the new landmark report into armed forces housing found that poor quality military accommodation had become a tax on the goodwill of service personnel and their families. Does the Minister agree?
Well, I'm very interested. I mean, she's welcome to send me a copy of this report. I'm not sure how entirely impartial it is. I'll be looking forward to reading the conclusions. Presumably, Mr. Speaker, it recognises that if we want better accommodation, we need to put the funding in. So I'm assuming that in its conclusion, it will be recommending that the party opposite commit to 2.5%.
Yeah.
Question 14, Mr. Speaker, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have considerably strengthened the UK's defence in recent years, and the Prime Minister's announcement to increase defence spending to 2.5% signals our intent to invest further to ensure our armed forces are equipped to deal with the threats we face. We are embracing innovation, investing in warfighting capability, and bolstering the UK's industrial base by reforming procurement.
Shows that drones are going to play a crucial part in future conflicts. So what is the government learning from what's happening on the battlefield to ensure that our armed forces have the equipment they need to defend us from drone attack?
It's an excellent question from my right honourable friend, and I'm pleased to see so many colleagues on this side asking about drones. So at the heart of our defence drone strategy is the commitment to learn from Ukraine, learn from the front line, We're well placed to do that because we have joint leadership of both the Drone Capability Coalition in relation to Ukraine with Latvia and, of course, the Maritime Coalition where uncrewed systems have been so important, and that's jointly with Norway. In terms of in defence, there are two key steps we're taking: improving governance to cohere that learning across defence into our armed forces, and in particular, Mr. Speaker, there's a strong relationship with industry, and I can confirm next month we'll be holding an industry day in the MOD with drone companies from across the country.
Number 15, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we take the risk of hostile cyber activity very seriously. Our department contributes to the National Security Risk Assessment and National Risk Register, and of course plays a key role in delivering the National Cyber Strategy to respond to hostile cyber activity against the UK.
British cybersecurity is amongst the best in the world, as the sector has innovative companies employing 58,000 people and revenues of 10 billion and more. Under his government, though, in the in the Ministry of Defence, the record for cybersecurity only gets worse, with breaches tripling over the last 5 years. So what steps is he taking to work with British cybersecurity innovators to overcome his government's lax record on cybersecurity, support British innovation and, crucially, keep our armed forces safe?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're doing all of those things at pace, and of course the scale of the challenge is very significant. We're injecting a huge amount of money and institutional energy into ensuring our cyber defences are up to scratch. And I can say, Mr. Speaker, that we are at the point of despair when it comes to defence of cyber, as illustrated by the brilliant men and women who are part of our national cyber force, and we commend them.
Question 16, sir.
Mr. Speaker, of course, the force protection of UK service personnel and our bases across the Middle East is kept under constant review. I can report back from having been in Bahrain and Qatar in recent days that morale and the conditions of those posted to the Middle East tends to be very high. They're a very purposeful set of people. But of course, for operational security reasons, I wouldn't make any comment on the security wrap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I pay tribute to the dedication and professionalism of British Armed Forces personnel in the Middle East who keep us safe from terrorism and other hostile threats. That has been the case over many decades. Will my right honourable friend consider relooking at recognising all people who served historically in Aden for a service medal?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course that was a very important campaign, and I'm very happy to engage with him. If I imagine he might be asking about a specific constituency case, and I'm very happy to consider that if we sit down together.
Healey.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm committed to ensuring that the 2.5% defence uplift means that we spend that money as efficiently as possible. It's one of the reasons why the tremendous work by my right honourable friend on the integrated procurement model is so very important to the outcome of that spending.
James Daly.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to hear my right honourable friend commit to the efficient use of defence spending, something which maybe we haven't seen in the past. But can I also ask him to comment? An excellent example of this is his recent announcement regarding the saving of Royal Marine warships and the fact that this government has committed to build the commandos up to 6 more.
Well, that's absolutely right. It's very important that our Royal Marines are able to continue their activities. So not only will we keep the existing ships running, but we've also announced that we'll build up to 6 new multi-role ships, which is all part of our programme to build 28 ships, which is why our shipyards are so very busy.
Sam Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because of government plans to mothball HMS Albion, key artefacts from the ship were given to Chester Town Hall for safekeeping, including the Sword of Peace. And then on the 14th of May, the Secretary of State announced that HMS Albion will not be mothballed. So when would he like the artefacts back? And exactly when is HMS Albion going to be put to sea again?
We've never announced she was being mothballed, so I'm very interested to hear about these artefacts. I was actually on HMS Albion the other week, and so I'll be very interested to engage in what's been removed. But once again, I can clarify, both of those ships, both used by our Royal Marines, will remain active in service. It is the case that more modern ships are being procured, only something that is possible because we're prepared to put a date to 2.5% spent on defence.
MP spokesperson Dave Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Increased defence spending is really obviously only a means to an end. It's not an end in itself, and the Treasury rightly takes a jaundiced view of the MOD's ability to spend money wisely. So to that end, can the Secretary of State advise the House how much taxpayers' money and defence budget was spent refitting HMS Argyll, only for her to be paid off immediately after she came out of refit?
Well, Mr. Speaker, look, first of all, I have to say that there's no way that the Treasury, given their very tight hold on fiscal regime, would approve a 2.5% GDP spend for defence if they didn't have confidence in the way that we're going to spend it. And again, I refer him to the excellent work of the integrated procurement model, which will make all the difference. I'm very happy to engage with him about individual defence decisions. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't commit to spending the money, you can't put the pipeline in place to build things like the new ships and submarines we need.
I'm unsurprised, Mr. Speaker, that I got no answer to my question, because I never got an answer to that question on January the 8th. I never got a response to my point of order on March the 24th. And I was only informed by the Defence Procurement Minister, who's whispering, hopefully, a response into the Secretary of State's ear, about what the fate of HMS Argyll will be after I read it in the media. So can the Secretary of State tell me a different answer then? Did BAE approach the MOD to buy HMS Argyll, or did the MOD approach BAE?
Very pleased that the Honourable Gentleman recognises that my right honourable friend has in fact written to him on this subject, and I've no doubt he'll wish to engage with him further.
Come to topicals for the Hollobone.
Buckle number 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, we are very mindful of the situation in Ukraine, and particularly in Kharkiv, where Russia are making or trying to make inroads. This is an existential battle for all civilised countries that believe in democracy and freedom, and it is the case that we must ensure the world continues to keep up the efforts. It is not right for there to be pauses in our support, and when there are, the sort of losses that we've seen, I hope on a very temporary, and believe on a very temporary basis, in Kharkiv, around the villages to the north, are an inevitable consequence of inaction.
General Pavliuk, Ukraine's commander of ground forces, recently confirmed that medium and short-range strike drones now kill more soldiers on both sides of the conflict than any other weapon. Isn't this both a grim milestone in the history of warfare, but also the strongest possible signal that His Majesty's Armed Forces must master this developing technology if we are to preserve and enhance our combat effectiveness?
Well, my honourable friend's absolutely right. It's one of the reasons why this country has been at the forefront of providing drones. Indeed, as part of our contribution to the Drones Coalition, we've made an enormous £325 million contribution to that. And actually, we've just provided 4,000 drones in the latest package, and there's a lot more to come for Ukraine. I should say this bloody war is now killing up to 1,000 Russians a day, or causing casualties, and it needs to come to a stop.
So, Secretary of State John Healey.
Mr. Speaker, the government's increase in military aid to Ukraine has our fullest Labour support for this year and the years ahead. Mr. Speaker, weekend newspapers report D-Day celebrations are at risk from RAF cuts, and the latest MOD figures confirm nearly 50,000 full-time forces personnel have now been cut since 2010. The Defence Secretary's predecessor admitted this government has hollowed out and underfunded the forces. He's right, isn't he?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I very much appreciate his support for ongoing support for Ukraine, £3 billion a year. I do have to just gently say to him, it's not possible to provide that support unless you provide a route to getting there with the 2.5%, otherwise it will come out of the rest of the budget. And when it comes to that story that I too read over the weekend, it's simply not the case. We will have, in fact, I think it's 181 parachutists, exactly the same number as actually jumped in that location on D-Day.
Healey.
We will also raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP to meet increasing threats, Mr. Speaker. But this is not the magic wand that will fix 14 years of Tory failure. The Army cut, Navy cut, RAF cut, even defence spending, 2.5% with Labour in 2010, cut by 80 billion since. Isn't it clear, Mr. Speaker, the armed forces can't afford another 5 years of Conservative government?
Labour government if they can't answer one simple question. When?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I and other colleagues, in particular including the members for South Dorset and Newport East, would like to follow up on the Minister's comments to the House in March this year regarding the tragic sinking of RFA Sir Galahad in the Falklands War. Does the Minister have any update to give on the release of further files regarding this case?
Mr. Speaker, following meetings with colleagues and veterans, having personally reviewed the files at the National Archive, and in the interest of transparency, I am placing copies of 2 recently reviewed extracts from the 1982 Board of Inquiry report on the loss of RFA Sir Galahad in the Library of the House. These extracts are drawn from different sections of the inquiry and have been returned to the National Archives within the main report, which will be publicly available.
Graham Morris.
Thank the Minister for that response. Hundreds of RMT members at the Royal Fleet Auxiliary took industrial action over their pay. That was just yesterday, which has fallen behind 36% in real terms, allowing for inflation since 2010. Earlier, his colleague, the Minister, commended the RFA crews for the work that they're doing, particularly off the coast of Gaza. So will the Minister agree to meet with RMT officials directly to ensure RFA seafarers are paid fairly for the vital work they do supporting the Royal Navy?
Well, thank the honourable gentleman for his question. As the grandson of an RFA officer, I can say that I defer to nobody in my admiration for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. I commend the RFA for maintaining its operational commitments, in particular in relation to Gaza, and clearly we listen to what Nautilus has to say with a great deal of interest, and I hope this dispute will be ended as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. RAF Valley is the largest skilled employer on Honest Morn, and the UK government has cemented its commitment to RAF Valley with £175 million for a new flying school, £600 million for Hawk engineering support, and £44 million to improve the second runway. What assurance can the Minister give to the engineers and those that work on the Hawk T2 maintenance contract that there will be well-paid local jobs for them post-2040?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm grateful to my honourable friend. I very much enjoyed my visit to RAF Valley in February. What I can confirm is that the RAF has already started its standard capability investigation process into the future of combat aircrew training. This comprehensive review will include the approach to the procurement of the replacement of the current advanced jet trainer capability. The investigation will consider options for aircraft, simulators and associated combined live virtual training, such that we can continue to deliver a world-class training capability for the UK Armed Forces. It will, finally, Mr. Speaker, it will provide evidence on likely costs and timing of the replacement training solution to the Hawk T2.
Very Sherman. Very Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I was thinking of a very even better question. Can I ask the Secretary stick to the main one? Mr. Speaker, you know I come from a military background in the family, but I'm not a military expert. But my constituents ask me, time and time again, they hear there's a shortage of shells, a shortage of ammunition, a shortage of the things that we can't supply to the Ukrainians. What is the hold-up? Why aren't we working 24/7 to produce the tools that our Ukrainian allies want?
I'm delighted to confirm the Honourable Gentleman, he asked about the supply of shells. We previously confirmed the provision of 300,000 artillery shells to Ukraine. The latest figure is that this country has procured 400,000 artillery shells directly into Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a smart tie you're wearing, by the way. How can it be that despite spending billions of pounds on 22 A400Ms, we only have one available for DD80? And if it's more, let's hear it. Why did we retire a highly reliable aircraft in the Hercules for a highly unreliable one in the A400M? Have we sold the Hercules? If we haven't, can we put them back in service?
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend as ever. As the Secretary of State confirmed, the truth about the position in relation to D-Day, we will have 2 A400s available for the 5th of June. The numbers of people that will be dropped is 181, and there's a very good reason for that. It's 181 because that is a number of paratroopers who at 16 minutes past midnight on D-Day itself landed and took the bridge that we named Pegasus.
Yeah. Mr. Strathern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my Westminster Hall debate last year, ministers announced plans to close Chicksands Base in my constituency and pledged to write with further detail. I'm yet to hear more from ministers, though, and in the meantime, my constituents are understandably getting deeply quite concerned. Will the minister meet with me to discuss this further and what more we can do to address the shocking state of accommodation on the base in the meantime?
Of course, happy to meet with him.
Whiteman.
Okay, I warmly welcome the government's commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence spending, but after we've won the next general election, growth will come into the economy, and indeed there'll be much more money to be spent on defence. How will my right honourable friends spend that money for the defence of the realm?
Thursday.
My honourable friend's absolutely right to point this out, because some assumptions have been a little misplaced in this House up until now. We will make sure that we can do a whole range of things which will help make this country stronger and more secure, and of that you can have my word.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Can I say thank you to the Minister for Defence, People and Families on behalf of Falklands veterans and their families, including Mike Hermanis, who brought the issue to me, for releasing those documents relating to the bombing of Sir Galahad in 1982, which therefore exonerate the Welsh Guards. And whilst I know the campaign, which includes the Honourable Member for Cardiff South and Penarth, will continue to seek the full truth, does he agree with me that instead of blamed, they are owed our thanks for their service?
I absolutely agree with the Honourable Lady. As the Government has made clear and consistently throughout, no blame is attached in particular to the Welsh Guards. They committed themselves heroically on that day, and I join her in her salute to them, and in particular to those who died.
Brilliant, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's of huge strategic interest to Britain and the West that Israel prevails against Hamas and its funders in Iran. And the Foreign Secretary was right to state last week that ending military exports to Israel would embolden Hamas and Iran. So does my honourable friend agree with me that such a move would both harm UK defence interests and disadvantage our own armed forces who rely on Israeli-made battlefield equipment?
Yes, I mean, can I just say that my honourable friend is correct in her analysis, and what we're particularly focused on ensuring that our assets in the region contribute to the release of the hostages.
Peter Grant.
Speaker, could the Secretary of State tell us what is the policy of His Majesty's Government towards defence deals and arms sales to countries whose head of armed forces is under arrest warrant for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity?
Well, as my honourable friend pointed out earlier, the reality is that the licensing regime is entirely independent of that. We support the country. We support the only democracy in that part of the world. We don't support the individuals in that government. We support the country itself.
Proud of our world-class aircraft carriers docked in nearby Portsmouth, providing thousands of jobs and being of huge credit to our Royal Navy. However, we all know that neither the Queen Elizabeth or the Prince of Wales has enough or has as many jets, small warships or submarines as originally planned. Will the Secretary of State please tell me how further defence spending will be used to bring online the full complement of F-35 jets, for example, so that our carrier strike group has the full capability to meet the modern threats today?
Well, my honourable friend asked an excellent question. She's right about the importance of the carrier strike group. On the key point about F-35, we've confirmed 48 aircraft by 2025 and a further 27 by 2033. But of course, in addition to that, it's working with our allies so that she's at the heart of NATO operations and ensuring that we have the maintenance, the crews in place. And as we saw recently, when we needed to get the second ship active, she was ready in 8 days, and that was a phenomenal achievement, and it shows how effective we are at getting our carriers in place when we need them.
Ruth Gabriel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister for Veterans Affairs promised last year to end veterans' homelessness by the end of that year. Yet instead, veterans' homelessness rose by 14%. Are ministers proud that their government is failing to deliver on its promise to its veterans?
Well, I would say to the Honourable Lady who's been consistent in this line of questioning that one person homeless is one person too many. And I think it's important to emphasise that most people leave the armed forces in a very good position indeed, with skills that will advance their careers in civilian life. And I do not want her giving the impression that people are damaged as a result of the service that they have given. The very reverse of that is the case, and we will continue to support veterans, charities and initiatives, of course we will, to make sure that particularly in places like naval-based port areas and garrison towns, we house everybody that needs accommodation.
Mr. Speaker, Britain's world-leading motorsports industry is worth at least £10 billion annually to the UK economy. The sports governing body, Motorsports UK, has proudly sponsored access to military venues for many years. But despite recently signing the Armed Forces Covenant, that access appears to be diminishing. Will the Minister please agree to meet with me and perhaps with DIO to discuss better third-party revenue-generating opportunities for the MOD estate?
Well, I'd be, of course, delighted to meet with my old friend, and I would just stress to him and to the House, of course, on the subject of motorsport, MOD has a brilliant partnership with McLaren, which we are jointly innovating to, for example, look at technology in relation to electronic vehicles. But yes, more than happy to meet with him and look into this further.
Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A constituent of mine who rents his home from the Ministry of Defence has recently been given notice to quit within 2 months without any reason. He's never missed any rent payments, and he's been unable to contact his landlord with a query on the instruction. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss the situation?
Well, I'm very happy to meet with the Honourable Lady to discuss what I would say to her, because I have seen several cases of people having to leave their service accommodation. In general, the DIO and the Ministry of Defence will ensure that people have more than the minimum allowed by legislation for people, and we bend over backwards to ensure that people leaving service accommodation have somewhere to go to. But I'm very happy to meet with her.
Final question, Jack Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend will appreciate the huge importance of what the UK defence industry is doing to help the Ukraine military get the equipment it needs. So can he update the House on what his department is doing to increase the amount of core munitions getting to the front line in Ukraine?
If I say to my old friend, who of course has the DNS in his constituency, he has been an absolutely consistent champion of supporting Ukraine, and he comes at every oral questions and makes this point. We are working hard to get more munitions in there. I mentioned about 400,000 artillery shells. I could list an enormous amount of ordnance. I just want to say to him and to the House, we are doing everything possible, not just ourselves, but cohering our allies and learning those lessons for our own armed forces. We have to be in this for long haul. The fight for Ukrainians' freedom is the right one.
Right. Is it relative to this? Right.
Defence procurement, inadvertently I'm sure, just misled the House of Commons. Pegasus Bridge was captured in a glider-borne assault by the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry, not a parachute assault. I know this because for D-Day 70 I was there with the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, at 12:16 a.m. to commemorate the assault. I'm sure this was an error, because no one will want to believe an MOD minister tried to change the history of D-Day because their aircraft didn't work.
The good news is that's a point of clarification which has been resolved. We now come to the urgent question. I'll just let the room clear a minute.